So what we can learn from this data is MAB, monoclonal antibody, is becoming the new blockbuster in the pharmaceutical industry. Look at the active pharmaceutical ingredient for the anti-rheumatic, oncology, immunosuppressant. It's all MAB, right? So the pharmaceutical industry is going into this direction, even for the copy industry. The copy industry in biotech is called biosimilar. Here's another evidence to support my statement, right? As you can see that the oncology, this is your start product, your STARS product, right? Using the concept of BCG, right? Meanwhile, the anti-infective antiviral, which is this one, represent this one, this should be your Cascol. Okay, so if you're in the product development or business development, okay, you're probably dealing with a lot of product portfolio. So you need to be able to manage your product portfolio innovation. Otherwise, it will be costly for you. Especially in the pharmaceutical industry, it's becoming very critical for the reason that I'm going to mention later on. Okay. Now, another fact finding on the monoclonal antibody potential market. Okay. This is 3 years data from 2016 all the way to 2018. What we can see from here is for many years, Humira, which contain the pharmaceutical ingredient is adalimumab, right? Humira was the world's top selling drug. We all, well, let's, instead of all of us, most of us, if you're coming from pharmaceutical background, understand that if you have a new drug being approved to the market, then you will be protected through patent for 20 years or 2 decades, right? 2 decades. Humira, for the last 2 decades, were able to monetize their patent, and they generate revenue up to $200 billion US. That's huge, right? What happened to Humira is back in 2016, sorry, here, 2016, the principal US patent is already expired. The US patent is already expired, which means other companies will be able to start producing the biosimilar. If you're working with a chemical based drug, this is where you have your generic product, right? But the interesting part is the companies that develop Humira, which is AbbVie, in order for them to prolong the life expectancy of Humira, so they can monetize it further, right? They were able to obtain additional 132 patents related with Humira's, especially related with manufacturing method and also with administering. They have a patent of it, meaning that they were still able to monetize their Humira and protect it themselves. So the biosimilar product is not in place yet. Time-wise, the biosimilar product of Humira, which is adalimumab, should be available in the market in 2023, which is next year, We'll see about it. Okay, but a lot of companies already working their hand in developing adalimumab biosimilar. Okay, of course, biosimilar is lower cost compared to the patented one. Okay, this is the reason why I said pharmaceutical industry is a very special case, right? You're probably fully aware that drug discovery process is very time consuming and very expensive. So the average cost for us to discover certain drug and then put it into the market, right? The average cost is around 2 billion. So it's around 31 trillion rupiah. And it can take around 14 years. This is the reason why if you are able to find a new drug and then the related government will protect you through patent up to 2 decades or 20 years. Because this is the investment that you need to make. And there's no guarantee along the way, right? Especially when you go into a clinical trial, probably along the way, you're doing great in phase 1 and then you move into phase 2 and then it doesn't work as planned, which means you need to think other approach, whether you're going to have a different purpose for your product. Okay, so it's a very expensive. It's a very expensive. When I was in the US, I get the opportunity to work with my professor to establish a startup in a biotech company. Okay, I was fortunate enough to work with him, and then we established our own startup in the biotech industry. Okay, and at the beginning, it was a private company. And then 2 or 3 years later, we were able to go into a public companies. And our share stock at that time was increasing from 50 cents, right? 2 or 3 years later, it's becoming $7 from 50 cents. And the beauty of our company, all of our product is still in the pipeline. We don't have any marketable product yet at that time. That's the beauty of biotech companies. Okay, so the market will respond to our clinical trial piece. Let's say you announce to the market, hey, we're going into phase 1, and then things work out well with the phase 1, and your stock price will increase significantly. Again, you don't have any marketable product yet at that time. Okay, so given the long time development and high cost in drug discovery, pharmaceutical company needs to choose carefully their product portfolio innovation strategies. That's the reason why I started with innovation strategies and then put it into perspective into our specific industry, which is pharmaceutical industry. Now, here's another interesting fact. Remember when I said there is a shifting from chemical-based drug development into bio-based drug development, because the sales data also supporting that trend. The pharmaceutical sales globally is declining. Meanwhile, the biopharmaceutical sales is increasing. At certain point, right, it might get into this point. Monoclonal antibodies and vaccines are the drivers for any biotech companies. Right? They're trying to get their hand into these two type of product. Right? Monoclonal antibody is in the pipeline target of asthma, Crohn's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, and various cancers. And a lot of companies are now trying to develop a vaccine development for AIDS, cancer, etc. Okay. So all of those evidence-based data that I just presented is in regard to innovation strategies in pharma industry. The whole point is to find a good balance between three components. The first one is the market dynamic. You're trying to find the desirability of your potential target market. What is their problem? And then you're going to address this problem through your technology capability. Do you have the core competency to create the product or not? Okay. Once you are able to answer to the desirability to the problem through your technology, then you need to start thinking about your business strategies. How are you going to grow your business further? Having the right technology, having the right market, it doesn't necessarily guarantee it will sustain your company if you don't have the right business model. So hence you need to have a balanced product portfolio, right? This is a project portfolio that I was suggested to one of our state-owned enterprise pharmaceutical company in Indonesia, right? You need to have, they need to have this type of project portfolio. They need to have an incremental development in which area, radical innovation in which area, and disruptive innovation in which area. Okay. But the interesting part, as of today, we have a different approach. We need to consider a new perspective to be included into our innovation sweet spot. Previously, there are only three considerations: desirability, technical visibility, and business viability. But now, a lot of companies trying to make sure that in terms of integrity, in terms of impact, right? They need to be able to determine what kind of impact that they can give to the society. That's where you have your innovation sweet spot. Okay. With that, I already covered the first concept of innovation. Now I'm going to highlight into the second keyword, which is the healthcare 4.0. It's a very interesting phenomenon happen. Okay. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with the concept of digital vortex or not, but you probably heard the word digital disruption a lot. So what digital disruption is trying to tell us, right? With the digital technology development as of today, a lot of industries being shifted. One of the movies that I love to watch during my childhood is a movie called Back to the Futures, right? Where people can travel through time, right? Through what do you call it? Black hole or time hole or whatever they call it, right? So the concept of digital vortex is showing us that the closer you are into the vortex, meaning that your industry will be disrupted rapidly. So back in 2015, in terms of the rank of industries, technology companies will be the first one that will have an direct impact of being disrupted by technology, digital technology. Our industry, pharmaceutical, is still a long way, right? Meaning that we don't have to worry that much at that time. But look what happened 2 years later. The ranking is shifting, changing. It's no longer technology companies that being impacted mostly, but now it's media and entertainment. What happened with healthcare and pharmaceutical? Whoa, it pushed even further, meaning that you still have your time, right? You still have your time. But look what happened last year, 2021. Healthcare and pharmaceutical, from the previous rank of the last one, 13, right? Now it pushed 5 rank higher to number 8, which means that digital disruption is already impacted our industry. So we need to be fully aware of it. Instead of waiting until it happened to us and then you come up with responsive strategies, right? We better start thinking about what kind of strategies that we need to implement to deal with digital disruption in the healthcare and pharmaceutical industry. It's all connected with the concept of Industry 4.0, right? Industry 4.0 is driving digital revolution across all aspects of manufacturing processes. There are a lot of definition about Industry 4.0. People come up with their own definition, which is fine with me, right? But if you look further into that different definition of Industry 4.0, you will find 4 main principles of Industry 4.0. The first principle is interconnection. Interconnection refers to the ability of all the available components to communicate and connect. When I said components, that include devices, sensors, machines, right? And then the second principle is related to information transparency. Industry 4.0 enables transparency, which provides the operators with comprehensive information that allows them to make informed decisions. Okay. The third one is technical assistance, which means that the system should have the technological facility to help the operators in any capacity. This can be for decision making, performing unsafe tasks, and problem solving. The last one, the last principle of Industry 4.0 is what we call decentralized decision, which means that the cyber physical system that from Industry 4.0 should be as autonomous as possible and have the ability to make their own decision and perform tasks themselves without requiring any assistance from an operator. Sounds very straightforward, right? Now, the third question that I would like to ask you, and then probably later on we're going to discuss it, is look what happened with today's tech startup company, right? What happened today is they let go a lot of their employees. Is it due to what people assume that we are dealing with startup bubble? phenomenon, startup a burst phenomenon, right? Or is it just business as usual? Business as usual meaning that if you're a company, you're going to focus in either creating revenue or minus cost. If you are struggling with creating new source of revenues, in order for you to maintain growing your companies, you need to deal with your costs. Right? So back again, is it really a bubble? Is it a really burst? Or is it just business as usual that companies does? Which means they need to minimizing their costs. Okay, that will be our discussion as well later. Here's are some application of Internet of Things and Big Data Analytics. BDA stands for Big Data Analytics in the Healthcare 4.0 that I was referring to, right? So IoT in digital healthcare refer to affordable, cheap, accessible, and personalized services. Wearable IoT. Some of you probably currently using wearable IoT. I'm using one of them as well, which is smartwatch. Right? It sounds an easy technology, but the impact of us using wearable IoT, this has a huge impact on our healthcare management. Why? Because now we are dealing with the shifting of curative into the 4P, which is predictive, preventive, personalized, and participatory. Right? And smartwatches are able to accommodate the concept of 4P. So you have abundance of big data that later on can be customized for each individual, right? What kind of healthcare management that each individual should work with based on the big data analytics that people generate from the smartwatch. This is the reason back probably 2 or 3 years ago, one of the giant tech company that we are familiar with, Google, they make their biggest acquisition, right? They make their biggest acquisition into a hardware company is focusing on creating smartwatch, which is Fitbit. The idea is very simple. Google would like to have their hand into a big data analytics so they can come up with personalized healthcare system for each individual. So they can suggest, hey, Yulianto, given with your current lifestyle, the way you're exercising, you have a tendency, let's say, of high blood sugar, right? Or heart failures. So this is what you need to do this is a program that you need to follow in order for you to avoid this. Google will be able to tell us up to this point because they have their hand into a big data that generated from our smartwatch. That's wearable IoT. Okay. The second one is fabrics and flexible sensors. Low-cost disposable patches. A lot of companies now developing low-cost disposable patches. Some of the companies that I'm familiar with that's developing fabric and flexible patches are Biostem. You may Google it later, Biostem, and then iRhythm, and then some companies even go with UV sensor, right, into a fabric. This is some of the example. Okay, and the last one is the ambience IoT, which describe non-wearable IoT compared to this one, is opposed to a wearable IoT. Non-wearable IoT, such as a motion, door pressure, video, object, and sound sensor. And then later on, doctors or physicians can directly access their patient through remote monitoring. So that's healthcare 4.0 by applying the concept of IoT and big data analytics. This is the reason why big data analytics is a very sexy term nowadays. Not because it sounds sexy, because the implication when you have your hand into a big data analytic is a really huge. And also blockchain, right? Blockchain technology in healthcare 4.0 is something that a lot of companies start considering, right? To this date, there's no requirement have been listed for a blockchain-based healthcare management system. This is a list of 7 criteria for management system using blockchains that has been proposed. First one is user identification and authentication. And then patient-centric core model, scalability across large healthcare participation, turning completeness, cost-effective compared to existing approaches, and so on and so on. Okay. And I've been seeing this happen also globally. The use of artificial intelligence in the fight against COVID. Robotic-based treatment can be conducted on patients using AI to reduce the risk for doctor through the use of virtual reality. Technology used in healthcare 4.0, such as AI, can detect any problem that the patient is going through immediately through the use of sensors, for example. So it can sense emergency situation. Okay. At present, healthcare 4.0 technology is also being used for AI-based video monitoring in China. It's really cool. Okay. So this is some example of the use of Industry 4.0 relevant to digital transformation in our industry, which later on created what we call the healthcare 4.0. Okay, and then the last one is, look what happened with cloud services model, cloud computing in healthcare 4.0. When it comes to cloud services model, you will have 3 different business model. You will have infrastructure as a services, platform as a services, and software as a services as well. In the healthcare industry, different information, such as information about patient, doctors, different hospital, and health organization, can be accessed from anytime and anywhere with the assistance of the cloud. And then the latest model, which is known as delivery model, has enriched the healthcare sectors in a way that they were able to lowering the cost. So the general proposition of cloud computing is ensuring the storage of huge data and computing power. Again, the healthcare industry will be able to lower their costs to maintain their profit. Okay, I guess that's all I have for today. Okay, and hopefully we have time for all of us to discuss about what's happened in the healthcare industry and also pharmaceutical industry, because that's what we are related with. Go back to you, Pak Andamar.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Yulianto, for the very insightful and detailed presentation. We thoroughly enjoyed that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so now it's time for us to have a Q&A session. So Bapak Ibu, all participants and friends, if you have questions, please use the Q&A box, or you can raise your hand so we can we can have a live chat with Pak Yulianto. Yeah.
Sure.
All right. Okay. So while we wait, from Pak Gabriel, do we have the attendance form to distribute to the participants?
Yeah, Mr. Andamar, I'll also distribute the evaluation form to the participants also. Wait a second.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Gabriel. All right, so okay, all right, that's the link, yeah, to the participation form. Yeah, all right, so to all participants, please use the link for the attendance form, and don't forget, we still have time for questions. So we're open for as many questions as possible. Yeah. All right. We are
Hey,
open.
Pandamar, I just want to disclaim
Yeah.
the best one, the 4 best one that have a great questions will get 50,000 rupiah each persons.
Wow. So the best 4 questions.
Best 4 questions.
Wow. Okay. The best 4 questions will get 50,000 rupiah. Okay. So, all right. So, well, I can't ask any questions now. Then we have to wait for 4 participants at least to ask a question. Yeah. You don't want the money to go to me. All right. So 4 questions. All right. So we have a raised hand here from Christopher Verrill. All right. So, Pak Gabriel, could we please? Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So, Christopher, all right, please. You've been made a panelist and you can ask your question, please. You can open your microphone and maybe your camera so that we can all see you, and you can start asking the question. Thank you, Christopher.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Andamar. But can I ask the question in bahasa, maybe?
Sure, no problem.
Oke, oke, kayak lebih enak juga. Tapi sebelumnya ini nggak ada opsi.
But you won't get the 50,000, right, Pak Andamar?
Well, maybe just half, Pak. 25,000.
Yeah, right.
5,000.
Go ahead, Christopher.
Okay. By the way, thank you so much Pak Yulianto untuk pemateriannya dan juga teman-teman dari I3L untuk kesempatannya. Ini aku belum bisa nyalain kamera karena nggak ada opsinya sebetulnya. Aku nggak tahu mencet di mana, jadi nggak apa-apa ya. Oke. Bapak Yulianto, thank you banget buat pemateriannya, sangat menarik. Cuma mungkin saya izin bertanya mungkin di kacamata bisnisnya. Tadi saya cukup tertarik di bagian pematerian tentang S-Graph. Grafik S yang untuk innovation-nya.
Yeah.
Nah, tadi sempat ada beberapa stage dan saya cukup penasaran ketika suatu usaha, let's say, usaha tersebut masih masuk di infant, masih masuk di introduction stage, dan usaha tersebut membuat suatu innovation, which is misalnya, let's say, innovation-nya produk yang cukup baru dan perlu edukasi di masyarakat. Nah, boleh kira-kira Pak Yulianto memberi insight tentang gimana sih cara usaha tersebut bisa educate dan one of the most important thing juga untuk validate apakah solusi mereka fit terhadap usahanya ketika resource yang dimiliki oleh suatu usaha tersebut tentu masih terbatas banget ketika masih di infant stage. Mungkin pertanyaannya itu. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Okay, should we address this or
Yes, Pak.
Okay.
We can start answering the questions. It's okay, Pak.
okay? Christopher, would you like me to address the question in English or in Sundanese or Javanese?
Maybe just in bahasa Bapak, bahasa Indonesia saja.
Okay, I need the permission from Mas Gabriel. Is it okay?
That's fine, Mr. Yulianto.
It's okay, Pak.
Okay, it's been a while since I spoke bahasa. Just kidding. Oke, Mas Christopher. Mas Christopher, asalnya dari mana? Sekarang atau lagi bikin startup atau gimana?
Asalnya dari Tangerang, Pak. Iya, lagi ada usaha juga kebetulan, makanya saya minta insight tadi di bagian itu.
Oke, so Anda sekarang sedang membangun startup gitu ya, kemudian tertarik dengan S-curve tadi, dan ini sesuatu yang memang perlu diaddress oleh a lot of startup. Oke, saya buka share screen untuk whiteboard supaya saya bisa coret-coret ya. Jadi gini, ada dua tipe S-curve yang harus kita pahami. Ya. Yang pertama adalah S-curve yang berhubungan dengan product life cycle yang tadi. Ya kan? Dimana ini ada introduction or infancy gitu ya. Kemudian masuk ke growing, ya. Kemudian nanti masuk ke maturity. Oke, ini product life cycle. Tapi ada S-curve kedua yang juga harus kita pahami yang berkaitan dengan adoption life cycle. Ya. Sama bentuknya S-curve kayak gini, tapi dia bell curve. Kayak kurva distribusi normal. Ya. Dan keduanya berjalan beriringan. Karena ini untuk menunjukkan bahwa di fase pengenalan, kamu misalnya sekarang lagi bikin produk startup Anda gitu ya. Di fase pengenalan, produk Anda itu akan diadopsi oleh dua tipe adopter yang berbeda. Yang pertama adalah yang dinamakan dengan namanya adalah innovators. Ya. Apa itu innovators? Ini bahasa simpelnya orang-orang geek atau orang-orang nerd yang memang paham tentang teknologi Anda, gitu ya, dan mereka mau ngulik teknologi itu. Mereka nggak paham tentang bisnisnya, pokoknya, wah, game ini keren banget. Gue pengen tahu belakang-belakangnya, nanti gue kasih masukan deh ke si perusahaan itu. Ya. Ini yang dinamakan dengan innovators. Secara proporsi, jumlah adopter tipe ini cuma 2,5% dari total potential your market adopter. 2,5%. Nggak besar, tapi cukup signifikan karena mereka bisa memberikan apa? Feedback dari sisi teknis. Ya, kurang apa, bugnya di mana, gitu ya. Mereka bisa memberikan masukan dari sisi situ. Nah, tipe adopter yang kedua itu yang dinamakan dengan early adopter. Ya, ini yang namanya early adopter. Bear with me ya, nanti tulisannya akan numpuk-numpuk, jadi harus diikutin benar. Nah, early adopter proporsinya itu sekitar 13,5% dari total adopter Anda. Karakternya seperti apa? Karakternya mereka bukan orang geek atau orang nerd. Tapi mereka tertarik menggunakan produk kita. Gitu ya. Karena menganggap produk kita cool aja. Keren banget nih produk. Mereka mau mengadopsi duluan. Ya, 13 plus 2,5 tadi berarti kan 16% ya. Nah, sekarang pertanyaannya Mas Farel, ya. Kalau Anda membangun startup, Anda cukup puas nggak ketika produk Anda dibeli atau diadopsi oleh 16% dari potensial total market Anda?
Tentu kayaknya lebih baik kalau bisa diimprove sih, Pak.
Ya, pastinya Anda ingin get your hand into the mass market kan?
Betul.
Ya kan? Mass market itu adanya di mana? Di dua posisi ini, yaitu early majority ya, dan juga late majority. Ini masing-masing contribute 34% dari total adopter Anda. Berarti kalau keduanya ada 68%. Ya. Semua startup will do their best untuk bisa get their hand into this mass market. Ya kan? Karena ini permainannya udah permainan masalah economic of scale. Betul nggak?
Betul, Pak.
Ya, masalahnya udah masalah economic of scale. Nah, di titik inilah ya, ada sebuah jembatan di sini yang dinamakan dengan crossing the chasm. Apa yang terjadi dengan crossing the chasm? Banyak startup yang sukses meyakinkan dua segmen sebelumnya, yaitu si inovator dan early adopter ini, gitu ya. Mereka sukses karena memang punya produk yang menarik buat kedua segmen ini. Tapi kalau mau masuk ke early majority dan late majority, name of the game-nya berubah, Mas. Bukan lagi Anda punya teknologi yang bagus atau enggak, punya produk yang menarik atau tidak. Name of the game-nya udah ngomongin apa? Name of the game-nya itu sudah ngomongin tentang marketing effort. Sudah ngomongin tentang distribution channel. Sudah ngomongin tentang supply chain management. Gimana Anda bisa masuk ke segmen ini secara efektif? Itu udah beda pendekatan. Nah, startup itu jarang yang bisa crossing the chasm ini. Mereka berhenti di sini. Karena untuk bisa masuk ke mass market ini, ngomongin tentang marketing effort, ngomongin tentang distribution channel, ngomongin tentang supply chain, itu butuh rupiah yang gede. Anda misalnya kan maunya marketnya let's say Indonesia gitu kan. Marketing effortnya harus seperti apa? Distribution channelnya harus seperti apa? Supply chain yang efektifnya harus seperti apa? Itu butuh duit. Nah, di titik ini jarang startup yang bisa crossing the chasm ini. Ya. Gimana caranya dapat duit di sini? Ya, Anda lah pitching ke eksternal investor. Nih, gue punya histori 2 tahun, 3 tahun membangun ini, sudah diadopsi oleh dua segmen ini sebanyak sekian produk. Saya butuh duit Anda, saya butuh resource Anda untuk kita bisa masuk ke market yang lebih besar. Kalau Anda misalnya mau pitching ke investor, kita ngomongin investor skala besar ya, apa namanya, investor company, oke? Terus pas mereka tanya, Anda sudah bisa meyakinkan dua segmen ini nggak? Wah, belum. Mereka nggak akan tertarik, Mas. Itu risky buat mereka. Mereka hanya mau nyimpen duitnya kalau Anda sudah bisa punya track record yang menunjukkan traction Anda di dua segmen ini sudah diadopsi. Nah, pertanyaannya adalah, ada nggak cara untuk mengakselerasi adopsi produk kita di market, kan? Kalau ternyata teknologinya tidak cukup dikenal, maka kita kan harus educating the market. Betul kan?
Betul. Dan itu tantangan baru, apalagi kalau inovasi baru juga, Pak.
Ya, sekarang saya tanya Mas Farel. Ya. Mas Farel punya smartphone kan?
Punya, Pak.
Punya. Ada berapa dompet digital yang Anda unduh ke smartphone Anda?
4, Pak, kalau nggak
Ada
salah.
4. Apa alasan Anda waktu itu mengunduh dompet digital tersebut?
Alasannya ada ini sih, beberapa kebutuhan yang mungkin di dompet digital 1 kebutuhannya nggak bisa dipenuhin, baru bisa
Nah,
dipenuhin
you're,
di
you're
yang lain.
not being completely honest, Mas Vero. The reason why we adopt all of those digital wallet because they offer us a huge discount.
Iya benar Pak, itu juga.
Ya kan? Karena
Iya.
menawarkan potongan harga. Ya. Itu cara paling efektif untuk mengeducate market ya, supaya bisa mengakuisisi customer secepat mungkin. Instead of Anda bikin campaign gitu ya, bikin campaign, marketing campaign, pakailah dompet digital ini, wah keren, Anda bisa ngeklik ini nanti akan lari ke sini, ini. Udah aja Anda pakai, ada diskon di sini 50%. Wah langsung orang antri untuk mengunduh aplikasi Anda. Iya kan? Yang di istilah startup itu yang dinamakan bakar-bakar uang, burning your money. Ya. Karena bakar uang itu efektif untuk mengakuisisi customer secepat mungkin. Let me give you some comparison. Okay, let me give you some comparison. Kita paham dengan Telkomsel lah, ya kan? Telkomsel they already been around since 95. Okay, so it's been a while for them. It's already 27 years something. Ya kan? Up to this point, the customer base of Telkomsel is around 171 million user. 171 juta pengguna Telkomsel. But it took them around 3 decades. Hampir 30 tahun tuh. Ya kan? Untuk mencapai angka tadi. Meanwhile, you have a services called OVO. It's only been around for less than 5 or 7 years ago. Tapi Anda tahu berapa customer base-nya yang sudah diakuisisi oleh OVO dari 5 sampai 7 tahun? Around 110 million. Mereka sudah punya customer base sebanyak itu. Caranya gimana? Bakar-bakar uang. Iya kan? So, the most effective way for us, for your startup, to acquire your customer, to educate your market sooner, instead of coming with a marketing campaign that explain your product, just let them use your product for free kalau perlu. Ya kan? But there's no such thing called freelance. Someone else need to take that cost. Nah, di titik itulah Anda perlu akses ke investor. Ya, untuk bakar-bakar duitnya kan Anda butuh sultan gitu, butuh tuan besar yang mau mensupport Anda. Kalau Anda nggak berani mengambil langkah itu, gitu ya Anda akan stay segitu-gitu aja. Startup Anda nggak akan kemana-mana. Kalau Anda mau pilih cara quote and quote organic way gitu ya, wah kita campaign sendiri aja. You are more than welcome to do so. Ya. Tapi dengan resiko apa tadi? It's gonna take a whole lot time to do so. Ya. Dan belum tentu juga nanti sukses. Bisa jadi nanti ketika Anda mengeducate market, ada produk kompetitor yang menawarkan hal yang sama, ada backup dari investor, gitu. Ya udahlah, pakai produk kita, nih saya kasih diskon 10-20% atau kasih benefit lain, gitu ya. Maka Anda akan menghadapi apa yang saya bilang tadi, innovators dilemma. Ya paling gampangnya pacarannya sama Feral 7 tahun, gitu, nikahnya sama orang lain. Bisa terjadi kan? Nah itu Feral, jadi harus dipertimbangkan ya, sisi waktu versus effectiveness-nya.
Oke, siap Pak. Betul sih. Kalau dipikir-pikir. Nyambung juga sama yang itu ya Pak tadi, yang visibility dan 4 yang udah jadi 4 itu sekarang.
Oh iya, makanya banyak startup itu sukses mengidentifikasi desirability or pain point dari customer, gitu ya. Kemudian punya solutionnya, gitu. Tapi nggak punya cukup bisnis model yang bisa di scale up. Karena kata kunci startup itu scalability. Scale up-nya mau sebesar apa? Segede apa? Kalau nggak bisa di scale up secara eksponensial, don't call ourselves as a startup company. We should call ourselves as a SME, UKM. Karena karakternya beda, Mas. Ya, ini UKM versus startup. Ini UKM atau SME versus startup ya. Nowadays people reluctant to use the word SME karena kalah seksi compared to defining yourself as a startup. Ya. Padahal karakter growing-nya beda. Startup karakter growing-nya itu yang saya bilang dengan revenue base. Misalnya Mas Feral bikin resto nih ya, bikin resto makanan. Okay. The question is Mas Feral mau nggak gambling, bikin resto pertama, let's say seminggu, ya. Kemudian di minggu kedua Anda langsung buka cabang kedua, ketiga, keempat, kelima, dan seterusnya.
Dilihat dulu dari respon di resto 1 dulu sih, Mas.
Iya kan, Anda akan melihat respon di resto 1, generate enough revenue, kemudian revenue yang di-generate di resto 1 akan Anda gunakan untuk membangun atau growing your business further. Either itu memperbesar area atau membangun cabang kedua, ketiga, keempat, dan seterusnya. Itu yang namanya revenue base. Ya. Sementara startup, ya, mindset-nya itu nggak boleh revenue base. Ya. Dia ininya adalah capital base. Kenapa saya bilang capital base? Ya. Karena pada awal pendirian startup itu pasti rugi, Mas. Betul nggak? Ya. Ruginya pasti edun-edunan karena Anda harus membangun produk, gitu ya, product development, ya. Kemudian testing the market, gitu ya. Itu kan butuh uang. Sampai nanti sudah mentok negatifnya, kemudian dia akan bounce back. Ketika bounce back, dia akan terjadi pertumbuhan secara eksponensial. Ini yang dinamakan dengan startup. Eksponensial berarti kan scalability-nya. Scale up-nya seperti apa? Kenapa konsep ini lebih menarik dibanding ini? Karena gini, kan tadi saya bilang Business 101 itu adalah profit sama dengan revenue kurangi cost kan? Ya kan? Ini revenue Anda, ya. Cost-nya kan dia akan tumbuh. Anda bikin restoran 1, restoran 2, dia akan tumbuh. Cost-nya juga nambah kan? Ini yang sering terjadi di teman-teman SME ini. Revenue-nya tumbuh, tapi cost-nya tumbuh dengan pola yang sama. The same pattern. Selisih antara ini yang dinamakan profit kan? Betul nggak? Jadi bisa jadi Anda punya 5 resto, 10 resto, gitu ya. Revenue-nya benar nambah. Tapi kalau Anda nggak bisa manage cost-nya wisely, at the end of the day, profit Anda punya 5 resto bisa jadi sama dengan profit Anda punya 10 resto. Ini fenomena yang dialami oleh banyak SME kita. Revenue-nya tumbuh, tapi cost-nya juga tumbuh dengan pola yang sama. Ujung-ujungnya profitnya sama. Sementara kalau si startup digital, terutama teknologi startup, dia cost-nya akan tumbuh secara linear, ya. Linearnya juga landai, sementara revenue-nya dia tumbuh secara eksponensial. Selisih antara inilah yang dinamakan dengan profit. Lebih menarik mana secara on paper? Kan konsep ini yang lebih menarik. Gap-nya tinggi banget. Algoritma dibanding eksponensial dibandingkan dengan linear. Konsep ini kan lebih menarik. Makanya konsep startup itu seksi. Ya. Tapi kalau Anda nggak menggunakan konsep ini, ya, karena untuk scalability ini berarti kan Anda harus langsung masuk ke mass market tadi. Ya. Anda harus bikin marketing campaign gede-gedean, Anda harus pastikan distribution channelnya bagus, Anda harus pastikan customer experience-nya gampang. Itu kan butuh uang. Ya. Jadi startup it has nothing to do with product. It has everything to do with your growing strategy. Produknya bisa jadi sama, tapi ada yang mau tumbuhnya secara SME, growth mindset-nya bisa jadi pingin jadi startup. Ambil contoh kopi lah. Anda bisa bikin warung kopi kan, satu kafe gitu ya. Udah fokus di satu kafe itu, nanti kalau kafenya generate revenue, bikin kafe kedua, gitu kan? Atau warung kopi kedua. Itu SME. Tapi Anda juga bisa pakai mindset-nya startup. Instead of creating just one store, gitu ya, awal langsung saya bikin aja 1000 store di beberapa titik. Itu misalnya yang dilakukan oleh Kopi Kenangan. Produknya kan kopi. Tapi mindset-nya apa? Startup. Karena mengejar scalability. Begitu itu konsepnya diterapkan, wah Telkom tertarik. Tanam duit dia di situ. Ya. Investor terbesar di balik Kopi Kenangan itu adalah Telkom. Ya. Jadi saya selalu bilang bahwa duit di Indonesia tuh banyak. Tinggal Anda tahu which door to knock, ya. Kemudian mau jualan apa konsep. Okay, I think I've been planning quite a lot, Mas Christopher.
Okay, thank you so much also for the insight, Pak Yulianto.
Yes.
Oke, Christopher, nanti bisa langsung chat aku secara pribadi ya untuk memberikan nomor rekening kamu.
Jangan lupa 50% dipotong ya, Mbak.
Enggak. Oke, terima kasih. Ini aku udahin untuk permission to talk ya. Langsung masuk ke pertanyaan selanjutnya dari Rata Fata Alif. Silakan Pak Moderator.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Mbak Acha. Okay, so we have another question here. We have 2 more raised hands actually, but we're gonna go with the one that we have here on the Q&A box. This one's from Rafata. Hi, Pak Yulianto. I have a question. As you said before in your slide, why in this time innovation sweet spot have a new variable of integrity? Thank you.
Okay. Who raised this question, Pak?
Rafata.
Rafathar anaknya Raffi Ahmad.
Tidak ada R-nya, Pak, belakangnya.
Oh, Rafathar.
Rafata aja, Pak.
Okay. Okay, Rafathar, to answer to your question, you probably heard this term a lot, especially lately. Yeah. ESG. Environment, social, governance. A lot of companies trying to make themselves to fulfill the concept of ESG, environment, being environmentally friendly product, and then has an impact, social impact to your society, right? And then you can show that you're running a really good governance. Okay. The reason why nowadays, when we talk about innovation sweet spot, needs to include this thing, environmental and social, and also governance, because that's what the market is currently looking at when they want to invest in a public company. Yeah. Jadi kalau Anda mau, let's say you're into a stock market, ya, Anda main di stock market, okay. Kemudian Anda mau memilih investasi di perusahaan mana? Trennya sekarang adalah nowadays a lot of people looking at whether the company that you're going to invest in, do they make any effort to make the society better or not? Is their product memberikan polusi terhadap environmental or not. Itu sebabnya maka poin keempat, which is impact to your society, should also be a consideration when you're trying to come up with an innovation. Karena itu yang saat ini seksi, yang saat ini digandrungi oleh market gitu. Kita kan sadar atau tidak sadar becoming more environmentally conscious. Ya, kita akan menghindari perusahaan-perusahaan ini perusahaan misalnya merusak petani gitu kan. Ini perusahaan tidak memberikan impact yang cukup besar terhadap lingkungan sekitar. Itu akan memberikan bad campaign. Oke, coba bayangkan Anda bisa bikin produk, kemudian produknya bisa Anda buktikan, oh produk ini ramah lingkungan, produk ini, services ini akan mengurangi emisi karbon sekian persen. Wah, itu seksi banget. Makanya momentumnya sekarang untuk lihat apa yang terjadi dengan mobil-mobil listrik, motor listrik gitu. They're getting the momentum now. Ya kan? Karena people is getting more environmentally conscious. Nah, itu mungkin jawabannya.
Okay, thank you, Pak Yulianto. So Rafata, hope that answers the question, yeah? All right. So, okay, so we have another question here on the Q&A box. This is from Yash. Good morning, sir. My name is Yash from I3L. I would like to ask you regarding the research and development of pharmaceutical companies. How can a pharmacy company be able to manipulate the costs of financial data of the research and development? What kind of pharmacy company does cut off manipulation? So that's the question, Pat. Thank you.
Okay, I think you're probably referring to the one of the biggest scam in biotech industry, right? Which took place probably around 2010 or 2011 with the case of what's the lady's name? Aduh, siapa itu? Yang memang dia manipulating the data gitu ya, sehingga banyak investor tertarik untuk invest their money into that company. I'm trying to recall the name of the company and also the lady's name. She was one of the youngest, wealthiest person. I'll try to find the name later on. But that's one of the biggest scam that's happening around. Okay, so yes, of course, if your mindset is already set into altering your data, one way or another, you find a way. Yeah, one way or another, you find a way. But is it really something that's going to be sustained for a long time? I don't think so. Okay, I don't think so. So you might be able to do so, let's say, for the first time, but trust me, sooner or later, it will come to the surface. Manipulating the datanya bisa terjadi, one way or another. Meskipun pengawasannya seketat mungkin, FDA kurang ketat apa sih? Gitu. Still, this lady was able to make her way gitu ya, to manipulate the data. Gitu. Begitu ada raise issues, FDA muncul, masuk, memeriksa, gitu ya. Ternyata clinical trialnya juga nggak dilakukan, gitu ya. Labnya juga ternyata lab bodong, gitu ya. Itu yang terjadi. It still could happen, of course.
Okay, Pak Yulianto, thank you for the answer. Okay, so Yash, I hope that answers the question. All right. Oh, Yash raised his hand again. Okay, right. So Yash, please, you can speak. Thank you.
Hello. Hi. just wanted to ask, I was more meaning on like how does usually a pharmacy company like manipulate its research and development costs? So like meaning that do they have to like out maybe exchange or like do they transfer or like record their cost to like next year, so they're lowering their cost, or like they try to increase their like revenue for this year to make it look as though like their
Okay.
research manipulation successful, because like I'm not sure if it's like possible for like a big pharmacy company to do so, but I would like to ask if that's like the case, is it possible for a big company to like manipulate research and development, and how do they do it?
Yeah, the short answer to that question is yes. Okay, this is what we call financial engineering. Okay, so you claim certain costs for the next quarter or for this quarter, and you claim revenue for next quarter into this quarter. That's also possible, right? But if you're a public company, then you need to involve, you need to bring, what do you call it? Apa istilahnya ya? Public auditor. Yeah, your data needs to be verified by a public auditor. Okay, remember with the case of Garuda.
Is it like Garuda's to where like their data they have too much debt, so they can't pay, right?
No, what happened with Garuda is they claim potential revenue as a revenue. Okay, so what happened is their market capitalization is getting really huge only overnight. Sebelumnya negatif, previously is a negative cash flow. Now they have a huge cash flow in their financial statement. And this data was backed up by public auditors. I'm not going to mention the name of the public auditors, okay? But later on, the public auditor gets scrutinized. Because one thing when you're becoming a public company is all people can access your data. And they can determine whether it makes sense or not. Yeah. Jadi itu financial engineering is very possible, Mas Yas. Yeah, that's also happening with a lot of public companies in different part of the world, including in Indonesia, right? Now we're at the end of the quarter, right? Now we're at the end of the quarter. What usually happens is the revenue that they generate from the previous quarter, let's say quarter 3 or quarter 4, okay? They're going to report part of it, and then part that they don't report, they will collect it into the last quarter to make the graph looks interesting, right? Wah, perusahaan ini tumbuh nih, lihat revenue-nya. Nggak ada yang salah dengan datanya. It's just financial engineering, mau disimpan di quarter berapa, gitu ya, atau disimpan di quarter berapa. The money is there, the revenue is real, right? Tapi we can a lot of companies trying to make their way to smoothen their chart to make it more interesting to the public. Because it's all about perspective, right? It's all about perspective. That happened to revenue, also cost. Yeah. Costnya bisa di spread.
Oh, so basically like with financial engineering is like you put the data, like and you put the recording of the revenue, but only part of the revenue to like any quarters, like previous last year quarters, that it looks good, but it's actually not true.
Yep.
That's what you mean, right? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I mean, could you imagine if let's say now we are into third quarter, right? In the business cycle kan kita udah masuk third quarter. If the graph looks like this, in terms of your revenue, is not very interesting, right? You can smoothen the data then, right? The data that the revenue data that you get from quarter 2, you're going to split it with the quarter 3. to make sure that it's not jumping too extreme. So yeah, that's a common practice that companies doing. People knows about it, but people doesn't talk about it.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much, Yash, for the question. Thank you, Pak Yulianto, for answering the question thoroughly. I guess it's nearing the end of our discussion. We only have 5 more minutes, so I think we're gonna have to close our Q&A session now, Pak. First of all, thank you so much for the presentation today and for making the time to come here today.
You're
And
welcome.
you've been a great inspiration to all of us today. Your presentation and the way you answered the questions, they were really, really insightful and detailed and very fiery, very passionate. Thank you very much. That's what we need for a discussion of this nature. Yeah.
Sure.
So again, thank you very much, Pak Yulianto. Thank you very much for all the participants who have come to today's session. And I hope that it's been fruitful for you. And don't forget to fill in the attendance form. And I will give this back to Miss Acha as the MC. Thank you so much, Pak Yulianto. Thank you, Miss Acha. Thank you, Pak
Thank you,
Gabriel.
Pak Damar. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too, Pak. Thank you so much, Pak. I hope to see you again soon, Pak, in another occasion.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.